Yes. Yeah, good evening, everybody. And I welcome you on behalf of Council for Ayurveda Research for the 16th General Club meeting for India chapter. And today we are really blessed with the presence of Dr. Sanjay Tamoli. And he is presenting a published article for critical appraisal today. And the Journal Club activity is basically for understanding the writing skills and how to read the article so that we can decode the whole concept and the study in terms of research designs, in terms of research techniques. So I will introduce Dr. Sanjay in brief. He is MD Ayurveda and PhD from R.A. Poddar Medical College, Mumbai. He is currently holding positions as founder and director for Target Institute of Medical Education and Research. It's a CRO engaged in clinical research, product development, and regulatory services, especially for Ayurveda and herbal nutraceutical products since 2010. He is also working in the capacity of CEO for Abhinav Healthcare, GMP certified company, and they are engaged in herbal manufacturing since 2003. He is extensively working on various products and in terms of the CRO, he has been a part and parcel of 120 clinical trials for major Ayurveda companies and Government of India projects, including CCRS. They conducted more than 10 clinical trials as CRO and particularly for COVID in last 2 years. Extensively traveled to many countries, more than 20, for spreading the right word about Ayurveda, and that too for research and development. Three patents he got, one for the US, one with WIPO patent application, and one Indian patent. And he has published more than 20 research papers in index and international journals. He has extensive knowledge of scientific writing and also in technicalities of the research. With many awards, I will just brief some of the key awards like Nagarjuna Award for Best Young Entrepreneur from New York Street, and it was supported by Government of Maharashtra Department of Ayush. He stood first in his PhD entrance and received a Star Research Project Award from DMER for PhD research, and also received many international and national awards with extensive CV. I will skip that part considering the time constraint here. And today he is going to critically appraise an article which is very interesting. It's a randomized clinical trial where GandhakaRasayana suppositories are being used in anorectal diseases. So not only the route of administration, but the way it has been put forward into the research is very interesting to know. And I will hand over the dais to Sanjay sir. Please go ahead for the article review. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Pranita, for this introduction and letting know the audience and everybody of what kind of work we have been doing, as not only as an individual but also as institute. Today, before we go into, like, say, the specific paper as such, which is the topic of the day, just to give you a brief idea or the background of why critical appraisal is required, and why we actually do it post, even, like, say, somebody has already published it and there is a lot of peer review process being done. So that we will discuss as the first part of it, so that you will understand the importance of critical appraisal. Post that, we will try to see what this particular paper that has been published in a good journal, a reputed journal, what how how the methodology was, and what kind of, like, say, outcomes that they measured, etc. Having said that, let me put it across on record that this particular presentation is only for academic understanding, for critical appraising of a scientific manuscript, and it does not mean or intend to harm or criticize any of the investigators or any of the team or the publishers, etc., and any person who is directly or indirectly connected with this manuscript and the clinical study. The views expressed here are only and only for the purpose of academic research, and there are no conflict of interest of any authors or myself as well, and and the council as well. So with this, we will go ahead with this critical appraisal of this wonderful paper that has been published in Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine, being a randomized controlled trial to evaluate the effect of GandhakaRasayana rectal suppository in post-operative pain management in anorectal conditions. Now, what's the uniqueness of this? Like, this is a very serious attempt being done by the investigators. Most likely, some of the postgraduate students who must have done this particular study. They must be really appreciated for what they have done. For the reason that these kind of efforts not only are important from the novelty perspective, but also from the perspective of providing alternative solutions, better solutions, solutions which can be of immense use. Like, say, I'll just give you one example, that what the present study is doing is primarily evaluating the, like, say, the pain relief activity of an intervention in anorectal condition. But what is more relevant probably from this paper, that when we try to analyze this as a research paper, is there are other very painful conditions of the anorectal region. It can be cancer, colorectal cancer, etc., which are really painful. But this gives you some kind of these kind of papers will show the path, probably, I would say, not the conclusive part, but a path in the direction that these kind of interventions can be looked after or looked into with seriousness, so that more work can be done on this. So just as I was speaking earlier, we need to first understand why this whole critical appraisal is required, or why, even after the paper undergoing a peer review and a lot of process of reviewing before it actually gets published. So we need to understand why this critical appraisal is required at all. You may be you and me may be a reader, or maybe a practitioner, or for that matter an academician also. We may be at different levels of our understanding, and therefore we may, when we read out any particular paper, we always should understand what's the need of evaluating that paper. And therefore Burles rightly mentions the process of carefully and systematically examining a research paper or research publication or a research article to judge its trustworthiness. That's very critical, very important, and its value and relevance in a particular context. This is why we do critical appraisal of a paper. That most important thing is the trust. So trust is it trustworthiness. It's not essential every time that you may err, you may create, like, say, you may be like having errors in methodology, or maybe in selection or outcomes, etc. But then after reading the paper, if you have a feeling that, okay, this is something which is trustworthy, then if at all, even the results may not be written the way it may have been written better. But still, if the trust is being established, then probably that creates something like uh, a confidence in the reader that if I try out this particular thing in a bigger population, or in a more uh, applying better methods, probably the results and outcomes could have been much better. So that's the most important part of a critical appraisal thing. Now, why it is important to critically evaluate in research article is critical appraisal of a literature may help in distinguishing the useful and the flawed studies. That's most important thing. At times, although substantial resources of peer-reviewed literatures are available, but flawed studies are still there, in spite of they being getting published into many peer-reviewed journals, etc. Flawed studies, if used to guide clinical decisions, may end up in no benefit, or at worst may result in insignificant harm. And therefore, it's very important that that trustworthiness that I was talking about, that is very, very critical. And readers can thus make an informed decision by critically evaluating the medical literature. So this is the reason why we do this. Now, what is being seen when we evaluate or when we assess for a critical appraisal, what we are actually seeing or what we are actually looking, and that is what we have seen in this particular paper as well. This article, which has been published as well, is that we query ourselves that okay, what could be the key learning point from this article. Now, at the end, we will try to understand this question: that what did we learn from this particular article after like say going through that paper? What was its clinical relevance? Because we ultimately it has to be beneficial for the society at large. That's very important. And therefore, what was the clinical relevance of it? If the study had a robust methodology or not, if the results were reproducible or not, could there be any bias or conflict of interest or not? If there are serious doubts regarding any steps, the reader can skip the article at this stage itself. So these are means it's not essential that every work that is being done may essentially pass all those criteria. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if the reader finds a sufficient interest and sufficient confidence that okay, this could be seriously taken up either into clinical practice or into further research. So that's the way to go ahead with this. Now, the core questions that we evaluate generally when we do a critical appraisal or a critical evaluation is: does the study have a scientifically interesting or an important aim? That's very important, which we will see in this particular paper. Will the study outcome provide a clinical significance? That's what we saw in the last slide also. Is the methodology designed properly? Are the outcomes that are being measured, so say whatever outcomes we are trying to measure out, are they properly evaluated or not? Is the sample size good enough to find some reliable or meaningful solutions? Is there a significant reason to doubt the validity of the findings? Say, for example, a poor sample size or large confounders, etc. So, like coming to this particular paper, from here onwards, whatever on the right side, if you are seeing is the point of evaluation, and on the left is the screenshots which I have took it from the paper itself. Now, if you look at the title of the study, and the introduction of the study, there are two things that immediately come to our mind. Is number one, this was a randomized controlled trial by evaluating the effect of GandhakaRasayana. Now, only thing in the title itself, what we as a reader, we are not able to understand any specific disease condition as such. So that is something which probably the authors could attend to, maybe, or maybe whenever somebody else writes it, is on anorectal disorders, severe pain management in anorectal disorders. So it becomes very unclear to a reader as to in what kind of anorectal disorders. Post-operative anorectal disorders can be many for that matter. So that clarity is not being seen if we are putting it anorectal disorders. It becomes too generalized, I would say. But it's not wrong to mention this, but it could have been better if more specific words could have been like say used in the title itself. Now, this particular study, when you read this study, you will find that this is more of a pilot kind of a study or more of an exploratory kind of a study. So in the title itself, the researchers or the authors would mention this as an exploratory kind of a study, so that the reader, with this mindset, the reader can read it out that okay, this, though they have mentioned this in the, yeah, in the detailed on the article, that this is an exploratory study, but in the right at the title itself, if things could be mentioned, things becomes more clear. Now, one of the things that like when you read this particular article or this paper, that you find out is that there is this concept that the authors or the researchers have worked on is basically anorectal disorders, and they have used GandhakaRasayana as a rectal suppository, which is definitely a novel idea. But when we read the introduction part of the article, of the published article, we find that the authors are trying to, or maybe focusing, I would say, to be more precise, is focusing on the use of basti karma. Okay, so this word, so Ayurveda opines that pain that can be produced without vata dosha, and basti karma is the best procedure for treatment of vata dosha. Now, and therefore, if you go down, you will find that suppository here looks to be something of a replacement or a better alternative to like say basti as a treatment. Probably that may not be essentially a right comparison. That because the mode of administration, the purpose, etc., many things for that matter, in terms of basti may not be as aligned as compared to the suppository. So concentration more could have been made on Varti, which definitely the authors have mentioned Varti also, but comparing it with Basti Karma probably may not be the right way to do it. I don't say that it's absolutely wrong, but the better way probably to was may have been to compare with other application methods, like say we apply different kinds of oils, different kinds of Varti, different kinds of powders, and other methods also are employed. Now, in those comparison, how this particular intervention of a rectal suppository could have been better, so it may have created more interest, or maybe more specific thing. Now, the other thing that we look whenever we study the article from the critical appraisal point of view are the registration, ethics, and funding of the study. So this is absolutely excellent. In this particular case, the study is not only registered with CTRI, but also, like say, they have very clearly and very nicely mentioned about how this ethics committee approval was, like say, procured. In fact, they have given very nicely the reference numbers. That was what I was talking about, the trustworthiness of a study. Now, things like this definitely create that trust factor in the mind, in the mind of the reader who is reading the article. Now, therefore this is really this is highly appreciable for the authors. In terms of design of the study, as I discussed right at the title, the design of the study, when we see while going through the complete paper, it is definitely a randomized controlled trial. But as we mentioned, there are certain words, like say there is a comparator also. There is this single center, one particular center. This particular study was done. Now, this was more of an exploratory kind of a study. Now, the thing that could be of interest, or maybe of value, is primarily being we are trying to attend over here the pain thing. Now, whenever we try to evaluate pain kind of parameters, it is too subjective to evaluate pain parameters, and therefore that raises a lot of question, that why what were the methods of pain evaluation, etc. And therefore, in this particular case, a blinded like say study could have been definitely better but there must be definitely some limitations with the authors and the researchers. For that reason, maybe blindedness would not have been created. We understand that that Gandhak Rasayan being used in this particular study at a dose of 0.6 grams on an application could have been, like say, a problem for creating a blind against a diclofenac kind of a suppository. So that could have been a challenge, but that challenge could again would have been listed in the discussion part, that double-blindedness would not have been possible. So this part on the design aspect could have been better mentioned, but again that does not take away anything from the authors. Now, in terms of methodology, what we usually would see is selection of patients, intervention, randomization, blinding, etc., which I discussed with you. What I'll try to evaluate one by one on this. So here, when we come to randomization and allocation, concealment, masking, or blinding, see, in this particular study, we understand that this study is for the purpose of academic reasons, definitely, and therefore the sample size is very small. So they took the researchers took a convenient sample size of 40, 20 in each group, and which were done by a simple randomization technique on footfalls on their clinical department. Now, in spite of there being 20 patients in each group, the question here is alteration of patients to each group was done by the guide. There could be even though there were only 20 patients in two groups, there could have been some methods of randomization, kind of like say some blocks could have been created, maybe block of 10, and then randomization could have been done on that basis rather than alteration method. This could have created more robustness to the study. In fact, they are very good at mentioning that the estimated time was 1 year, but they could complete the study in 4 months. Again, that was nice of the authors. But at the same time, randomization is very critical part of any study, and therefore, when you want to randomize 40 odd subjects into two groups with 20 subjects in each arm, you can easily randomize them through other methods rather than using only alteration methods of the patients being done by one of the researchers. Now, sample size estimation, yeah. So in this particular thing, again, no reason for sample size estimation was provided. The power of the study, etc., which are required for sample size estimation was not provided. Probably the reason, as I mentioned earlier, is probably this particular study was for more of an academic research, and therefore a simple, convenient sample size of 40 would have been taken, right? Now, this is something which is very important. It's more of a consort statement which is required for any good publication to happen. Now, the thing which as a critical appraisal of this particular paper is this, that there are total 40 patients, and there were no screen failures. There were no like say. Also all of them got randomized. So this particular section could have been better framed, I would say, in terms of if 40 patients were screened. So then there would have been no screen failures that could have been mentioned, and then accordingly randomized. So here when we say randomization, or randomization or allocation, so the numbers could have been better presented over here, so that one could understand that there was no screen failure, which in any situation or any trial, when you are randomizing 40 odd patients in a study, there are very high chances that you will definitely get some screen failures also. But they must have definitely employed some methods that all the subjects could have been randomized. So in the trial group A, there were 20 and 20 intervention, etc. So that is properly mentioned. Again, there are no dropouts, and therefore 20 patients could have been evaluated. Now, this flow chart or this consort flow diagram could have been presented in a better way, in the sense that the screen failures could have been even if they were zero, they could have been like say mentioned over here instead of not mentioning that particular point. And across from 40 we start and then we end at 40 without any dropouts, etc. That I would not say creates question in the mind, but the data could have been more cleaner, I would say. Now, when we analyze paper again, what we also look forwards to in terms of analysis of the results it's very important that the baseline demography of any clinical study is presented. In this particular paper, the baseline demographies in terms of gender, in terms of age, etc., have been mentioned, but the duration of illness of a particular patient as to how many patients were suffering from which condition at baseline, what kind of operative procedures they were carried out, etc., could have been better mentioned so that the baseline demography would have been more clearer. Apart from that, if you see the results perspective, I'll give you one example that visual analog scale was used for evaluating pain. So at the day one, that's the day when like say operation was done and the baseline parameter was like say 1.4, and then over a period of 5 days. So this is 5 days. I hope everybody must have gone through this particular paper. At 5 days interval, the pain, the soft tissue tenderness, the sphincter tone, etc., was improved to an extent that it became practically like say asymptomatic at that particular point of time, and therefore they have mentioned 0. But what's the other part of it is when we see the between the groups, when we analyze, we see that visual analog scale at in group A versus group B. Here you have a lot of difference in the baseline like say parameter itself. So you at 1.4 and 2.75, probably these two values may be significantly different at the baseline itself, and therefore eventually like say while we have absolute symptomless patient at day 5, you have still patients suffering from pain at day 5 in B group. Therefore, it's very important that the baseline demographies are also compared from 1.4 to like say 2.75. Was there any difference between them in this STI GS also 0.9 and 1.55, and here 1 and 1.65. So this is again very important whenever we do a critical evaluation of a paper. There is definite difference between the scores right at the baseline between these two parameters, and therefore this baseline demography understanding is very critical and very important. So this was one of the other things. Now, if we see the results part of the whole let's say paper, it mentions very clearly that the overall comparative results evaluated that there was significant improvement of 85% in group A and 80% in group B. It's again important to evaluate between the groups what was the difference. Now, if the difference is not significant, that should again be mentioned between the group analysis. From the baseline, yes, definitely it looks like A is better than B, but then what's the difference between A and B is also to be evaluated. Many a times what we observe, and this is also an observation in this paper as well, is that the mode of action is mentioned in the results. This may not be always essential to mention the mode of action. This could be only a part of discussion. But in results section, we should always try to speak more about what were the outcomes of the study, the primary, secondary outcomes, whatever we had designed. Are we meeting those primary, secondary outcomes? And only focus on the results should be there, rather than maybe discussing on the mode of action of a particular drug under study or the IP under study. So that's something that was something that could have been probably avoided, and that does not take away anything from the research study that the researchers have done, but this could have been probably part of only the discussion part of it. Now, this is all about it, and let me again reiterate the fact that like a wonderful work, a path-breaking research is being done on a new novel intervention in the form of GandhakaRasayana, which could show us the path towards pain management, because pain management is something which is very seriously looked after in Ayurveda. And therefore, if interventions like GandhakaRasayana could play a critical role in pain management, it will be really a big contribution to the science as such. and therefore this particular kind of study will definitely show more headways and more path for future research to be done on interventions like this. They have wonderfully, taken this bold step to evaluate post-operative pain. It's very difficult. We being into this research, we know how difficult it is to convince patient to insert something in their body, which is not established, which is still under research. And really appreciate the work that have been done. But only thing is being somebody who has to evaluate that. Some points could have been better evaluated and put forwards to. Was the whole reason of this critical appraisal, and that's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful, description about the whole article. And as you rightly pointed out, this seems to be an academic study, maybe for a postgraduate or a PhD level, and then they tried to establish a new concept. But yes, in terms of the guiding for the next researchers, this is useful study in working out. So I would like to request participants, if there are any questions, we can have a couple of minutes on that. Any questions, they can put it in the chat box, or they can unmute yourself and you can just ask the question. Yeah, anyone? Okay, meanwhile, I'll just ask one question, sir. As you said that there is a 40 sample size. In most of the academic projects, it is like 30 to 40, maximum is 50. So when it comes to the article review, which could be the best sample size, which where we can say that, okay, this is a good article in terms of a good number of patients. So is there any golden number there?
Yeah, so Dr. Pranita, that's a very nice question, and that's, I would say, that's a point of concern to every researcher.
Yeah.
So the way to calculate out sample size, definitely a statistician would help us in doing that. Having said that, in academic research, more of exploratory work is being done. Therefore, that factor has to be always kept into mind. However, the method of calculating the right sample size is definitely reviewing papers which have used similar sample size. That's number one. Number two, how much power you wish to give to that particular outcome that you are measuring. What are the confounding factors that you will take into consideration? And last, again, coming back to that point, that the why you are doing this particular study. Are you creating something which is like, say, the final say to this study, or an exploratory kind of level? And therefore, even sample sizes of as small as 40 or maybe 60 can be relevant, but that has to be supported properly with past research, and that is very critical. As to, like, say, these kind of studies were done in the past, and we took from leads from that, and then we decided on that sample size, and a proper justification of that could add more value.
Yeah. So rather than the number, we need to focus on the content of the study and how they are justifying that number. So sometimes a sample size worth 30 is also good enough, and sometimes with hundreds of sample is also not good enough for us as a reader. So definitely this article is a very fundamental article in establishing a newer path. And here there are many participants who are active in they are in the beginning phase of their research career. But I would like to mention to participants that this kind of critical appraisal is necessary whenever you are reading the article. And then intricacies can be identified where we can actually contribute into our next study. So I hope this article review was useful to you. in planning your study and also in understanding how to read the article. When we become good readers, then only we can write good articles. So this is the very key and fundamental aspect of scientific writing, that we need to read good content, and so that we can develop good content at the end. So I hope there are no questions from the participant, and if there are any, you can please ask. And this recording is will be shortly shared on our Facebook page. And on behalf of Council for Ayurveda Research, in the capacity of Chair India Chapter, I would also like to invite all the participants to join our membership for Council, and there you can take benefit of all the literature and all the resources which are being generated in various activities. Also, please follow us on Facebook, and you can write to us about any queries related to this participation in this article on Ayurveda Research USA @gmail.com. So I must appreciate Dr. Sanjay sir for his extensive work on this article, and I know that he's very much busy in his schedule, but he took out time for us, and it's very precious to share your views, and they are really helpful for all the participants. Thank you so much for being there. Thank you all the
Thank you very much.
for making this a success.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Pamita. Thanks a lot, and best wishes to the council.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Thank you.